Soft field of clover, moon shining over the valley. Join in the song of the river, to the great giver of the great good. As it enfolds me, somehow it holds me together, and I realize I've been singing. Still it comes ringing clearer than clear. And here by the water, I'll build an altar to praise you. Out of the stones that I found here, and I'll set them down here, rough as they are. Knowing you can make them holy, knowing you can make them holy, knowing you can make them holy. I think how a yearning is kept on returning to move me down roads I never have chosen, half the time frozen, too numb to feel. I know it was stormy, and I hope it was for me learning. Blood on the road wasn't mine though. Someone that I know has walked here before. So here by the water, I'll build an altar to praise you. Out of the stones that I found here, and I'll set them down here, rough as they are. Knowing you can make them holy, knowing you can make them holy, knowing you can make them holy. Here by the water, I'll build an altar to praise you. Out of the stones that I found here, and I'll set them down here, rough as they are. Knowing you can make them holy, knowing you can make them holy, knowing you can make them holy. I will sing with you, my family, will you sing with me? I will sing with you, my family, will you sing with me? The notes won't always come out as I'd like, but I will learn to see the Lord in my own
On a humid October night in the city of Damascus, two men sat on the edge of one of the city fountains. It was almost midnight, and the typically loud capital city was eerily quiet. Normally there's bazaars and cafes, there's little markets on the alleyways and side streets, there's people and hustle and bustle, and there's nothing. It's midnight, it's dark, it's quiet. The only people that are on the streets right now are these two friends enjoying some quality time together, sitting at this fountain, and the president's security force. And their entire job is to make sure that this city stays following the rules, following the commands, following whatever is put in place. They're ready to silence anyone that's speaking out against this government. And so the two friends are sitting at this fountain, and one is they're sharing in casual conversation. They're talking back and forth. One of the friends decides to light a cigarette and smoke, and the other friend reaches slowly into his pocket, grabs a paper packet of colored powder, and slowly drops it into the fountain. They both get up. They walk away, and that's that. But all over the city, at that same moment, all of the fountains in the capital city, the same thing was happening. And when everyone woke up in the morning, every fountain in the capital city was turned bright red. Every fountain was turned bright red, and so there's this buzz and chatter that starts happening. People are wondering what's going on. Everyone is excited and awake except for those two friends who are sleeping in a little because they were up late. Right? They had other stuff going on while people were sleeping, and so they decided to sleep in. But the man that was holding the packet, he finally decides to wake up, walks outside with a cup of coffee, and this young girl rushes up to him and says, "Did you hear what they did? The fountains are red, and everyone is talking about it. It's so exciting." I think my favorite fact about this true story is that it took the security officials an entire week to clean each fountain. It took a really long time for one little packet of powder. Last week we talked about how the world isn't how it should be. And when we get that feeling, when we get the feeling building up inside, when we start to feel like, I don't think the world is how it should be, we have three options. The first option is we can do nothing, which is one I often choose out of paralysis of I'm just one person, I can't fix these big problems. And so because I don't know where to start, I just don't start at all. When the world doesn't feel like how it should be, the second option is we can change it. But only in the places where change can actually happen. I think that is a really key message that Jesus gives us, that there are some moments that we can change, and there are some where we can't in this moment. And so when you feel like change can't happen, you can choose to live differently. It's not choosing paralysis, it's not choosing to do nothing, it's actually doing something quite profound. You can live differently. And so this week, I would like to talk a little bit about how living differently actually changes things. How living differently actually makes a difference in the world and changes things. But here's how, okay? Sometimes living differently actually changes the situation at hand. And that's amazing. But sometimes living differently doesn't change anything. But what living differently can always offer is hope. Hope is a really powerful force in our world. It's offering an opportunity to people near us. If someone is saying the world isn't how it should be and I'm going to choose not to buy into that, I'm going to live differently, that is showing your friends and your family and your neighbors that there's another option here. You mean I don't have to pick those two options? There's another one that I can decide to follow in my life? Count me in. That sounds amazing. That is an opportunity to give somebody hope. I can't remember when it was, but I believe it was in the fall. But at youth group, we talked about leadership. All of the qualities that make someone a leader, and how many of those qualities of what we might call godly leadership is very different from what we see in the world. There's a different way of being a leader. I mean, last week we talked about that, right? Jesus shares a really famous verse. You know, the leaders of the world, they're always going to let the power go to their head. So don't be like them. He's recognizing that's probably not going to change. That's leadership as we see it in the world. And maybe there's a different way to be leaders. And so at youth, we were talking about this for 4 or 5 weeks. And one of the topics that came up was being a leader. Being someone that possesses leadership qualities isn't necessarily the most outspoken person. It's not the most confident person in the most typical way that we look at confidence. Being a leader is setting the culture, by living by example, by recognizing, I think there's a problem, or I think there's a culture that needs to be fixed, and I'm going to live differently. And by living differently, by setting that example, I am offering other people the opportunity to partner with me in also living differently. Often all it takes is one person to do one thing for other people to get the confidence and the courage and the hope of saying, maybe I can do that as well. I'm sure you've felt that, right? Most of you have set foot in a high school. Some more recent than others, but you probably all had the same experience in high school. There are a lot of people with a lot of problems, and all it might take is a few of them to say, let's talk about it, to free other people up to say, I can talk about my own stuff as well. Okay, I'm in. But so often we choose the opposite approach of what I call the living life through what ifs. You know, what if I open up and they use that against me? What if I am vulnerable and someone disagrees with that? What if I open up and I'm now a target? And so we get scared and we choose to stay quiet and do nothing when the world isn't how it should be. But that simple idea of saying, I'm going to live differently, and choosing that confidence and courage, hopefully, provides hope for the people closest to us to say, hey, maybe I'll do that as well. All it takes is one person to live differently to start that snowball rolling down the mountain. Because, I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of fear in being vulnerable. There's a lot of fear in being vulnerable. There's a lot of fear in being on your own. And while I know most lists say that public speaking might be the top fear in people, but I really think it's vulnerability. You know, what is the underlying emotion behind public speaking, behind being alone, behind insert whatever fear there is? Being vulnerable is terrifying. And so when we are struggling, we say it's probably easier if I just struggle alone, because vulnerability sounds a lot more terrifying in this moment. we usually try to do anything we can to avoid that feeling. In 2011 and 2012, there was a man named Ahmed Zaino. And he looked at his home country of Syria, and he felt in his bones that the world isn't how it should be. That the political regime, they were and they still are violently controlling the country's citizens. And so Ahmed had some options, as we've talked about, right? The world isn't how it should be. People in my country are not being treated the way that they deserve it, and so I can do nothing. I can change it, but only where possible, or I can live differently, and in living differently, maybe I will actually change something, or at very least, maybe I will provide hope for people. And so what he did, Ahmed Zaino got a few of his friends together, and he said this, and I love this quote. I want to make sure I get it right. He said, "We know that the regime will keep shooting and bombing us, that people will die, and that's not going to change. But if we start shooting back, more people will get killed. We must try to use a different language." We need to try to use a different language. And so fast forward to Ahmed Zaino sitting beside a fountain at midnight holding a small paper packet of red powder. He found a language that gave hope to his community. Because whether living differently changes the situation or not, it will always provide hope for people who need it, and hope is a powerful thing. And so over the years, you can look this up yourself, Ahmed Zaino has found all of these amazingly funny ways to fight for change in Syria and to provide hope for people. Him and a group of friends, they tied balloons with little messages of hope and encouragement and released them into the sky. It's pretty hard to avoid that statement. They asked people in their community to drive with their headlights off at night so that you are reminded as you're driving, I'm not the only one who's feeling this way. So are they, and so are they, and so are they. They put speakers into trees and they played music that was banned by the government. And I mean in really tall trees, so it's pretty challenging to get those speakers down. One of his favorite forms of protest, in an article that he was interviewed in, he said, "I think my favorite form of protest that our group was involved in had to do with ping pong balls." Really simple ping pong balls. In December of 2011, his group released over 2,000 of them. Exactly like this, but they decided to write one word on them, and they wrote freedom. And so they found the steepest road that they could in their neighborhood. They grabbed 2,000 ping pong balls, and they did something very simple. They dropped them. And all 2,000 ping pong balls went bouncing and picking up speed and going down this slope. And in my opinion, maybe you would agree with me, what is more funny than seeing really scary security officials chasing ping pong balls? It's this really profound statement that I hope Ahmed Zaino realizes. Imagine the amount of hope that neighborhood would see as they're looking out their windows, as they're sitting on their balcony, seeing 2,000 bright orange ping pong balls bouncing down, seeing these really scary guards with really big guns running after them, and realizing just because they're in power doesn't mean they're in control. You know, that's a really big statement to realize for the first time. Just because this thing in our world is happening doesn't mean that you're actually in control. We can still decide to live differently whether you're in power or not. And what a great reminder of that hope as they are running down the slope, and then as they call in extra security officials so that they can continue to pick up all of these ping pong balls and put them in a bag. I mean, what a display of we can have hope, we can make a difference in the world, even if you continue to stay in power or not. There is another way to live. Who's with me? Is what Ahmed Zaino is saying to his community in that moment. And so that brings us to today. In, what is it, the month of May in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a pretty fitting month to be talking about hope, wouldn't you agree? As I think about that, the thought that has been circulating in my head all week of just because they are in power doesn't mean that they are in control. It's been pretty hard not to bring that into perspective when we're talking about mental health, right? Mental health concerns, difficulties, struggles in our country and in our world seem pretty powerful. I mean, by the age of 40, 50% of people in North America are going to have major mental health concerns or situations. 20% of our students are struggling with big situations in life. I don't mean little things, but something big going on. 60% of people living in the US feel lonely on a regular basis. We're all dealing with some sort of difficulty in our lives. We're all feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders. And yet, the thing I find so crazy is that we have all probably felt at one point or another, I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only one who feels this way in this moment, and so I'm not going to bother other people with how I'm feeling. They probably won't understand. And yet, I mean, statistically, let alone on a human level, we are far more similar than different. We are going through far more similar situations than not. We have a lot in common with our community. But back to that leadership conversation, back to the work that Ahmed Zaino is doing. Which one is easier? To be vulnerable and have the what ifs come into our mind, or to say, I'm just going to deal with this on my own? I must be the only one. I remember when I was a student in college, and I was really struggling with my emotions, with my faith, with my purpose in life, with who I am as a person. I mean, really big college-y kind of questions, you know, trying to sort out your identity, trying to sort out who you are as a person, and just feeling really stuck and unsure what to do. You know, feeling like, I mean, I'm okay with my life, but my life wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I don't know how to get it to that place. And so a friend and I, we decided to go for coffee. And we sat down, we had our drinks, and he said, "How are you doing?" And I said what we all would probably say in that moment, "Good." And that's where I was going to leave it. And then I said, to be polite, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Can I be honest with you right now? I'm actually kind of struggling, and I feel like you're a safe person that I could talk this through. Can we talk a little bit more seriously? Like, we can talk about basketball later, but I just feel like I really need someone to chat with right now." And I think in that moment, he assumed that he was the vulnerable one, and I was the person, this safe person that he was going to. But in that moment, he was a leader. By him deciding to be vulnerable with me, it gave me this immense freedom that I don't know if I had felt before that in my life of, I would really like to talk about how I'm doing. I don't really want to just say I'm good when I'm struggling. And all it took was that one person to throw their ping pong ball down the hill to give me courage to throw mine. And so we had this profound conversation. We met regularly. We continued to talk. I mean, he's probably one of my closest friends now. And all it took was him to have a little bit of courage that I didn't. Not to say that I know the answers, not to say that I can fix it, but just to say, I'd like to be honest. How about you? It's a really powerful thing for someone to lead with honesty when I desperately wanted it but felt the what-ifs clouding my mind. And so, here's the plan for this morning. Last week, I scared all of you by saying there would be participation this week, and yet I didn't scare you enough because you're here. That's good. And so here's the plan. As I was thinking about this two-part talk, I was really thinking about it's great that we have ideas in our head. It's great that maybe we have a different perspective or a reminder of hope or encouragement or something. That's good. And I'm happy, I hope that provided, that this provided some hope for you. But I would love for our community to be different. To live a little bit differently in the world. Because here's the thought that's been going around in my head. I mean, what makes something a church? For me, it's pretty simple. It's a group of people who say, we are in a relationship with God, and we are now in a relationship with other people, and great, now you are a church. And churches have done really beautiful things, but I think that definition is important in understanding why churches have done really bad things as well. Because if you're just saying, I am in a relationship with God and I am in a relationship with some other people in a relationship with God, there is a lot that can happen in that relationship. But what makes a church into a community? For me, that's why I keep coming to this building. What makes a church a community is a group of people saying, I am going to stop looking at all of the other people in these seats as potential competition or what ifs in my brain, and I'm going to start looking at them as community, as collaboration, as true, what humans were designed to do. My very simple opinion on this could probably be another message, is the sin that came out of Genesis chapter 3 is people looking at their neighbor and saying, what if? It's a comic picture to some extent that, we have the tastefully drawn pictures of Adam and Eve without clothes, covered by leaves and whatnot. And why do they not need clothes? Because they don't feel vulnerable in that moment. They feel like they're a community. And as soon as they decide that person might have their interest ahead of mine, that they might be a threat, that they might be my competition, well, now there's vulnerability and now I need to cover up a little bit more. What makes a church a community is saying it is so easy to choose competition in this moment, I'm going to choose collaboration. I'm going to choose honesty. I'm going to choose vulnerability. I am going to choose to value this community more than just myself. And while there's a lot of difficulties that people have with church, and maybe rightfully so, I think if a church decides to become a community, that's something that I can get behind. That's something that keeps me coming back every Sunday. And so here's the plan. I would love for us to be a community this morning. I would love for us to participate together in saying, just because the world is scared of vulnerability, just because it seems easier for us to struggle alone than to be honest with people, doesn't mean we have to. And so here's my really simple plan. I'm going to share a statement. And if you've done it or if you've felt it, throw your ping pong ball in the air. If you don't feel like that is a possibility, lift your arm in the air. If you don't have a ping pong ball, do something. Maybe throwing your ball up in the air or lifting your hand in the air will give someone else in this room courage to also throw theirs. Maybe you throwing your ball up in the air will remind someone that they aren't the only person who has felt that way before. And if you feel like in this moment, I'm fine being vulnerable. I don't need to have that reminder that there are other people in my life who are feeling the same way, then that is fantastic. This is not for you. What is for you is being a leader. Throwing yours up and giving freedom to other people to say, I can be honest as well. In a world that is so terrified by vulnerability, let's live differently together. Are you okay doing that? Yeah. I mean, you don't get a choice, but I will ask it. All right. Have you ever been in love? Have you ever felt self-doubt? Have you ever felt misunderstood by someone? Have you ever laughed so hard you started to cry? It's a good feeling. Have you ever found it hard to actually believe that God loves you unconditionally? It's a hard one. We say it a lot, but that's a hard one for people to actually believe. Have you ever felt rejected by a group of people before? Have you felt God's presence in your life in a moment? Have you ever wondered why you don't feel God's presence? Have you felt stuck in your life? Have you ever felt like you had to pretend to be someone you're not? Have you felt lonely before? Have you ever felt angry at God? Have you felt like you didn't belong? Here's a hard one. Have you ever felt like in a season of life, like life feels a little bit meaningless? Have you ever had a problem that felt too heavy to carry on your own? Here's my prayer for us this morning. Thank you for doing that really simple exercise, but hopefully it'll remind us that we can be a community grounded in honesty. My prayer is that if we can be a community built on honesty, that we can make a difference in the world. That maybe the world will change, or maybe not. But a community of honesty and vulnerability can give other people hope. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I have many answers in life. But I would love to give hope if possible.